Before we begin, here is a brief history of the Reformation era. The Reformation was a split in the Latin Christian Church instigated by Luther in 1517 and evolved by many others over the next decade, a campaign that created and introduced a new approach to Christian faith called Protestantism. Martin Luther and John Calvin abolished the distinction between secular and sacred callings. They broadened the idea of vocation in medieval terms, a call to a contemplative life, by incorporating into it the secular professions. A physician or a nurse might glorify God in treating others medically, and as much as a priest might do so in caring for souls. The Reformers' desire was to extend God's redeeming grace into every activity of life.
According to Saunders 2017, medicine known today was heralded by the Reformation period, also known as the Dark Ages. It was strongly based on faith, and Christians had already known the teachings of Jesus Christ and his apostles, which led to the development of medicine throughout the centuries. The Reformation period was during the 16th century, and Martin Luther emphasized that diseases can be traced back to a natural cause or had a natural explanation. This perception changed the whole thought of the need for doctors in the view of the public, and he promoted the development of medicine by advocating that doctors should be used to treat possible diseases. According to Alberta Health Services 2015, Christian Science is a community of faith based on the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Bible. They emphasized on the practice of spiritual, prayer-based healing. And during that time, most persons believed that when you pray to God or you have a faith in Him, it could lead to some spiritual healing based on a certain disease that they might have or that their family members might have. During the Reformation period, nursing was not valued as an intellectual endeavor. It lost much of its economic support and social status. The nursing conditions were at their worst during the Dark Ages, and new hospitals were built, but they were basically an horrific place, and it was also unsanitary due to the epidemic and the rapid rise of diseases throughout that time. Also, poor sanitation was due to massive crowding, and there were less places for persons with health conditions to go, even though new hospitals or health facilities were being built. The rise of diseases and the amount of persons contracting these diseases increased by a large amount on a daily basis.
My name is Mikayla Molar, and I'll be continuing from Miss Canigan. According to Davis Judd Simpson in the year 2010, many pioneers of health were men and women of faith, and with that, Christians remained active in all fields of medicine. During that time, there was a drastic shift in healthcare where the monasteries who cared for the sick and poor were no longer available to perform such tasks. The nurses' societal status quickly depreciated, leaving the lower class and unfit persons responsible. Nuns and other nurses were asked to leave, and the schools and many hospitals were closed as a result. Because of this, there was no one to pass on the formal knowledge that was learned in order to continue this practice. So, as a profession, nursing eventually came to a standstill and was the lowest paying job. According to Ping 2011, Martin Luther was the main influencer in the Reformation era because he was the one who started it just by pasting a note on a door. So Martin Luther and his followers believed that physicians needed spiritual guidance to cure the sick. He also believed that God gave man the ability to cure the sick with medicine. And because of this, the evolution of the entire Reformation era was based on religious beliefs. And because of this, they also focused on baptism, midwifery, nursing, and hospitals. They implemented forms at that time. During this era, anatomy and physiology was heavily studied, and the community members played a role in providing for each other and helping out each other, the sick and the maimed. So as we know, this era is also called the Dark Ages. This is because nurses not really ceased to exist, but they weren't doing their jobs as how they would have been at first. So because of this, the churches played a very important role in society. They were responsible for housing and caring for the sick and destitute. So because they did not have formal knowledge of what to do or how to care for the sick, the disease prevalence and mortality rate in this era increased immensely. This played a very important part in the profession nursing.
The most dominant factor during the Reformation era that developed nursing was religion. Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church and expressed his thoughts on how people could not buy themselves into heaven by purchasing forgiveness for their sins. The statement put out by Luther challenged the Catholic Church greatly as priests and rulers grew rich off of these purchases. John Calvin and Henry VIII also challenged the Pope's authority, and this led to persecutions and wars. The dark period of nursing was used to describe the nursing conditions as schools and hospitals were closed and nuns and nurses were ordered to leave. Due to the closure, no one was there to pass on the medical information on how to care for the sick. Philip Mathalan, a friend of Luther, based his studies on the exploration of dissected bodies. He believed that the study of anatomy and physiology could be beneficial to Christians who wanted to affirm God's existence. This study also led to a great deal of information and treatment, which hence led to a better healthcare system. Martin Luther changed how the public viewed physicians as he explained that some diseases were naturally caused and not by black magic.
Johannes Bugenhagen and Luther were both advocates for poor relief. So, Bugenhagen devoted some of the church money to the poor. He also believed that midwives should be qualified, honest, and regulated. And this, as a result, led to midwives becoming licensed, and citizens are now attended by honorable and competent midwives. Luther also stated that God gave man the ability to think, so that man could use their skills, such as medicine, to be used for healing. The Reformation had lasted effects on medicine, as interest in healthcare and charity for the poor increased, as the demands for qualified persons increased.
Okay, let us look on what a profession is. As you can see here, a definition from the Australian Council of Profession 2003 gave us a beautiful idea of what a profession is. And looking at this definition, we can pinpoint important terms such as a profession is disciplined, they adhere to ethical standards, they accept they are accepted by the public as possessing special knowledge and skills that are widely recognized by a body of learning. Also, we can look on the fact that a profession is able to use this knowledge and exercise these skills in the interests of others. Okay, so now we're going to look on Abraham Flexner 1910, who conducted a medical study and went on to study other disciplines, to which he later wrote a paper about social work and published a list of criteria that he believed that are characteristic that all true professions should have. Alright, so here we have all 6 criteria that he believed that are characteristics of true professions, and we'll be paying attention to a few of these throughout the presentation. Alright, so we're going to now look on the dominant criteria according to Flexner that we see that emerged in the Reformation era. Now, this dominant criteria that we saw is mainly number 6, which states that profession and its professionals are becoming increasingly altruistic in motivation. And this we can say that they are service oriented. That is, in the Reformation period, nursing was a profession motivated by altruism, which is the will to help others, providing a service to others because we see that the service is needed. So it wasn't forced. We saw that the service was needed. So as we can see, if it is that the Reformation period was a religious war and healthcare back in that time was done mainly by the churches, such as Roman Catholic churches, then with war there was pressure on the churches, which meant that there was no service being offered in terms of healthcare. So the poor were greatly affected. So based on this, we can see how Flexner's criteria came into play. When women of the lower class with problems such as alcoholism and who were former prostitutes with no training or education took care of ill who needed medical help. So service oriented, to which we have discussed earlier that altruism is the will to help others who are in need. So these untrained, uneducated ladies not from backgrounds that one would not call professional saw the need to help those who were ill. Based on this, Flexner criteria of nursing is not only about knowledge, so it's not about the education, it's not about the training, but having a strong desire to help those who are in need, which was what happened in the Reformation period. So not that the others were not important, but we saw where the need to help or the need to do something based on desire stood up more in the Reformation period than others, to which we look on how other criteria of Flexner came into play in the Reformation period.
So another of Abraham Flexner's criteria spoke about the practical application rather than theorizing. This was evident during the Reformation era when young peasant girls were trained for 6 months on how to care for the ill both physically and spiritually. The focus of this training, done through the Daughters of Charity, which was established by Louisa Marillac and Saint Vincent de Paul, was on the practical side of nursing rather than the theory side of nursing, which during this time was not more important, but it was most necessary, seeing that the number of ill was increasing and they were in great need of help. In addition to this criteria was not the most dominant criteria because the desire to help was more prevalent. Thank you. From A. Flexner's 6 criteria of a profession, service orientation was portrayed as the dominant professional criteria during the Reformation era. Flexner described the criteria as a profession motivated by a willingness to help others, which is defined as altruism. This is seen where the nuns, or monasteries as they were called, were influenced by Jesus' willingness to provide care and restore people to good health. They, along with other groups that developed during that era, a prominent one being the Sisters of Charity, served and provided healthcare to poorer and less fortunate citizens, even during a period of what was described as the dark stages of nursing, where nursing as a practice was scrutinized and looked down upon, and nursing was one of the lowest paying jobs. The conditions were also not ideal. Famine, plagues, filth, and horror were rampant. In Europe, for example, King Henry VIII succeeded in his efforts to eliminate organized monastery reliefs that was provided to orphans and other displaced persons. Throughout Europe, homelessness and begging was abundant, and what's worse, those caught begging were often severely punished by being branded or beaten. The poor suffered the most. Throughout the Reformation era, Flexner's criteria of profession were shown to a very minimal extent, considering the lack of intellect, self-organization, and order during that period. Flexner's criteria, which states that a profession involved intellectual operations and that they derive raw materials from both science and technology, was absent in the nursing practices at that time. This is so because nursing conditions were considered to be at their worst. After monasteries who acted as caregivers were no longer available, the least fit persons in society became healthcare providers. Least fit persons such as prostitutes,
hey, yo, somebody help me. My arm is broken. People come inside. Okay.
low-class citizens, and even prisoners who were serving their sentences were made eligible to provide healthcare without having any prior intellectual knowledge or training in the field of nursing. It's in the hospital.
Yo, wake up. Wake up, man. Hey, yo, give me your temperature. So, young man, take the temperature. Take the temperature. Ain't nothing in your hand. You think I'm playing with you? Hey, yo, give me the temperature. So take it. Take the temperature. I'm giving you the temperature. Give me the temperature. I said give me the temperature. Yeah.
All this led to nursing being viewed as having no social standing or social organization, which would then speak to the absence of another one of Flexner's criteria of profession, tending to self-organization, or in other words, must have a strong internal organization of members. There is also not enough evidence of possession of educationally communicable technique. One prominent event in the Reformation era that justifies the absence of this criteria was the closing of hospitals and schools. Nuns usually educated girls in religious schools, but that came to a halt after the closing of the facilities that were being used. This then led to the lack of available trained healthcare personnel to pass on knowledge about the specific language or communication technique used in nursing or healthcare.
Historical and current context together have helped the nursing practice to meet the professional criteria today. Starting off with reference to some of the historical events from the Reformation era, 15th to 16th century, nursing practice was not considered a profession at that time. However, some practices helped to establish a path leading towards professionalism. The act of altruism, which is one of Flexner's characteristics of a profession and was the dominant criteria in the era, served as one of the main driving forces that helped the nursing practice to survive the Reformation era. Also, to some extent, being practical in their service, which is another criteria of Flexner, was evident in the era as well. These acts of services helped to set the framework or principle upon which the nursing practice started to build or form roots for further development. As time advanced, the nursing practice began to institute more professional standards. Nursing developed their own governing body, which reflects the self-organization aspect of Flexner's criteria of a profession. Nursing theories undergo continual research, and the duties are assisted with evidence-based practice. This fits the criteria of deriving raw material from science and nursing. The educational communicable technique of nursing is demonstrated in the use of the standardized nursing language used in today's nursing practice. The nursing education utilizes a professional training manner for the student nurses where the seriousness, conduct, and level of professionalism is a mirror of what is expected in the working world.
Thank you.